time, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to wrap up, and I'm asking you specifically the issue around collaborating with the private sector, whether we have created strong enough platforms for us to be able to get the most that we can out of the engines of growth, that is the private sector.
I think I'll begin by saying that there has been a demonstration that Africa is a safe destination for investment. During the opening part, Mark Edo saluted Aliko Dangote. He committed $19 billion to invest in a factory, which means that he has confidence in Africa. So what I would like the private sector, African private sector, is that they should have greater confidence in Africa. There's work to be done here and there, but they cannot withhold anymore. They should invest. Money is not a problem. They cannot withhold anymore. They should invest. Money is not a problem. Last night I was scrolling on the wealth status of Africa. And the figures that came up is that Africa currently has 23 billionaires and about 328 central millionaires, those $100 million and above. So the money is there. It's the willingness that is not there. Come out of hiding. Invest in Africa, invest in Africa, invest in Africa, and Africa will prosper.
Commissioner, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please help me in thanking our panel for an insightful conversation. Final comment from me is that perhaps let's have those very frank conversations about what needs to be done in order to change what we need to be done. And I think I'll take your last point, which is that no African product should go outside Africa and then come back into Africa, i.e. leaving African capital abroad. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your silence. Thank you for your insight. Mark?
Thank you, my brother. Maybe we can have a photo.
I don't know if there's a photo.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And another warm round of applause for not just the panelists, but the moderator. Thank you. Thank you, Godfrey. I want to acknowledge the presence of Her Excellency Josefa Sako, AU Commissioner for Agriculture and Rural Development, Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment, who's joining us from the AU in Addis. Very welcome. Now I've got a little bit of a treat for you. We've moved the schedule around a little bit, and you'll be pleased to hear about this. Now, last month, Africa's largest oil refinery was opened in Nigeria, in the Lekki Peninsula, if any of you have ever been there. This $20 billion Dangote refinery will not just meet the country's petroleum needs, but it will also offer export surplus to the rest of the continent and beyond. Now, tomorrow, the chairman of Dangote Group will meet Nigeria's new president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And I understand from media reports that he's taking a familiar friend along in the guise of Bill Gates. That's tomorrow. Today, he's here with you. Please welcome Aliko Dangote. this is an unexpected treat for me because I wasn't the one supposed to be interviewing you, but God is kind, and I get my opportunity to sit with you again.
I'm always scared of facing you. But
You're always scared. You don't have to be. We've been friends for a long time. This is a happy occasion, 30th anniversary of Afreximbank. Now, as I understand it, Afreximbank was the biggest financier, or at least I think, of the refinery, or certainly one of the biggest. Just in a sort of sum up, what role Afreximbank has played in your story?
Well, thank you very much. I would like to first of all thank President Orama and all the board members for inviting me to come, even though unfortunately I have to rush to Niger because Bill Gates is arriving there this evening, and so there was a mix-up in my this thing. But I think Afreximbank is the most foremost multilateral institution in Africa. And I can tell you, without Afreximbank, there is no way entrepreneurs like us will even grow at all.
Wow. That is a fantastic validation.
Afreximbank actually, they did more than enough. I even said it during my speech. First of all, they believe in what we are doing. That's number one. Number two, they do understand the business. Number three, they know that, yes, it is a must for us to have a refinery in Nigeria or anywhere in Africa, because as we speak today, out of 55 countries in Africa, only 2 countries are not importing fuel.
Wow.
Yes, Algeria, Libya. But the rest are all dependent on traders. But Afreximbank, any time when we had an issue, there was an issue during COVID. Any time when there's an issue, they come up with a big check. I'm not talking about small check, big check. So really, I must thank, President Orama, the board members, the entire management of Afreximbank, because without Afreximbank, actually our dream wouldn't have been, our vision wouldn't have actually come to fruition. So they did a lot. They gave us a lot of advice. When we had issues during COVID, because everything stopped, Orama himself met with me severally to advise which way forward. And, both himself, the team members, Anil and co, they really, really helped. But it's not only even about our refinery. I can tell you the only bank that normally will put its check on the table if you now go either yes or no. And they're very passionate about actually, building or industrializing Africa. You won't get any money from most institutions. It will take you years to just go on discussing. I know the way business runs is that whatever is good today might not be good tomorrow. So if there is that delay, at the time that they want to give you the money, you might not need the money at all. But with Afreximbank, I think most of our transactions, they don't last more than 3 months.
So they're fast turnarounds.
Fast and prompt. So the relationship has actually been very, very, very good. And I want to personally, thank the president and chairman, the board members for assisting a lot of entrepreneurs like myself in Africa to make sure that they make our dreams come true. Like what I said, I have quite a lot to do, but I feel that, look, without coming here, I'm not going to show my appreciation. So really, Afreximbank, a very big congratulations, and I want to encourage you to keep, doing what you are doing, because really, we are a dumping ground in Africa. And what I keep saying, because we have not really industrialized, we're only exporting, raw materials. So what is happening is that people are actually importing, what's going on is that we're importing poverty and exporting jobs
wealth,
out.
yes. So it's a mathematical equation that will never make us poor.
We'll never make it,
Yeah,
yes.
never
You know,
make it,
we're
yeah.
saying that, yes, we're going to grow. I mean, you take a country like Nigeria, we're saying that, yes, by 2050, Nigeria will be number 3 in terms of population in the world.
Yeah, young people, yeah.
Young people. But then, how many things are we producing? There are not really many things. And this thing is not really very difficult. I mean, I can give you a story, for example, like our cement. Okay? If not because, I know that, yes, President Obasanjo was the one that actually mobilized and, have the creation of this, Afreximbank himself and the former president of ADB in DI. And they said that, look, we must have our own. So, Mr. President Obasanjo, I must thank you for having that vision of creating Afreximbank. And, leaders like Obasanjo, President Obasanjo, is that they always look beyond things, and say, okay, fine. Because, for example, President Obasanjo, as at 2002, the entire cement production in Nigeria was less than 2 million tons. And Obasanjo called me that, look, what do we do? How can we, because we cannot allow you guys to just keep importing cement. And I said, Mr. President, okay, maybe I should remove my own personal cap and put Nigeria's cap so I can advise you better. And he called me very early in the morning. I had to fly from Lagos to Abuja. So we now sat down, and he took some of my advice, and now he went and created something which made it now possible for Nigeria, within a period of 10 years, not only to be self-sufficient, no, a major exporter of cement out.
Wow. Now you're talking about vision. Cement, salts, sugar, petrochemicals, flowers. It seems like you've almost built everything that needs to be built. The question is, what mountain is left to climb for Aliko Dangote? You're 65 years old. You still have quite a bit to go.
Yes, our own is not really keep building or keep making money. Our own is that we're actually the face setters. If we keep investing in Africa, believing in our own this, because there's nobody, Americans will not come, or Japanese or whatever, to come and develop our own economy. So we have to do it. So our major job is that we are the drivers, whether good or bad. And if you look at most of the 14 African countries where we are, where they have limestone, we went and debottleneck their cement issues. Let me give you an example. When we went to Zambia, we couldn't even have cement to build a factory. It was very difficult. We went to Ethiopia. I mean, today, if we shut down our factory in Ethiopia, they will run into trouble, because the foreigners have no interest in increasing the capacity. They have interest in making more money on a smaller supply.
Yeah.
So really, not only me, other Africans, we must get together, we must assist each other, we must go to banks like Afreximbank and show them what we have, so that we can fully industrialize Africa and make sure the AFCTA works.
That was my next question, actually. We have the Secretary General of the AFCFTA who gave a lovely opening gambit about progress so far and his vision for the future. Where are you now in terms of your vision or view of the AFCFTA now, after just opening the biggest oil and gas refinery in Africa? What's your view?
I think my view is that we must make sure AFCTA works. And if you look at it, that is the main reason why most of what we have set up in the last 4 or 5 years, with the assistance of, consortium of banks, AFD, African Development Bank, other local commercial bank, and also some other institutions. We now have 3 million tons of urea, and sometimes when I hear African countries looking for fertilizer, I say, but we have a lot. Nigeria produces 6 million tons. And we did all this within the period of 5 years, both ourselves and Indorama. So there's actually enough if it's urea. That's number one. Number two, other countries that they don't have gas or whatever, then they have urea, which we can now freely trade between us. Okay? And then now you have the petroleum product. Petroleum product, we are going to produce, we are going to use 650,000 barrels per day, which is a lot. So it can satisfy the entire, the entire West Africa and some of the Central African countries like Angola and Co. It's a very huge capacity. We have 900,000 tons of polypropylene, and we're doing more of plastics. So this will actually help in terms of, free trade. I remember one time, they organized some, a seminar trying to, at that time, people believed that, yes, we as Dangote, we are not interested in, AFCTA. I said that, no, we are very, very interested.
It wasn't my seminar.
No.
Okay.
Yes, it was. So what I keep saying is that, yes, AFCTA is the greatest idea. It will help to grow all our economies. It will create massive amount of jobs. Most of these youth that we have that are littering around, they will be able to have jobs. But we have to cooperate. We have to make sure that, things move. I don't want to now be in a position where I used to be, because right now I have the African passport. But the African Union passport allows you to move around, even though there are about 2-3 countries that are not allowing, they are not agreeing up to now. I don't know why. But you see, if I have to get a visa to get into country A as an African, and now we go with a British guy or maybe a Nigerian, it has happened to me, a Nigerian holding British passport, he was allowed in, and we're arguing, debating about my visa. And I'm the one, and I'm the one with the money.
Can you imagine?
Yes.
Can you imagine?
So I think what maybe African countries they need to do is that, why don't you give Africans visa on arrival? That will facilitate trade.
Yes.
If you are making life difficult for me, there's no way I'll go and invest.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, without mentioning a name, when we're building factories all over, we invested about $620 million in South Africa, actually the biggest African investment. And then a neighboring country, I don't want to mention the name, and they say, okay, fine, come and, actually Angola. They say,
okay, it's Angola.
Come and invest.
Yes, okay.
And I said that, no, I won't invest in Angola because getting even visa was difficult.
Was difficult,
yes.
Yeah.
So, this thing we must free up and make sure that we allow Africans to move in. You can see, okay, fine. Today, when you talk to them, they say, I don't know, it's about security. But then I say, okay, fine. So most of these guys disturbing us in Mali, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, and Co., these guys, they don't have a visa. They don't even need a visa. They come through the land. So if they don't need a visa, why, me that I have money, I want to invest, you are harassing me? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So please, as Africans, we must actually, take this sort of political will in removing all these obstacles. Because, today you look at it, if I ask you today, what do you think is the easiest visa to get today? And they used to be the most difficult.
Rwanda? Saudi
Arabia.
Oh.
But it has actually opened up the economy. The economy is booming. Saudis are making too much money. Hotels that I used to go and pay $500, they are charging almost $2,000 because they are having avalanche of people arriving there. So why don't we even do something? We can say, okay, fine. If you have a visa since we don't trust ourselves in terms of security, you say, okay, fine. If you have a visa of UK or visa of European Union, visa of Canada, visa of America, when you come to Africa, we'll give you visa. Because those countries must have done all the security checks before they issue a visa. So let us latch behind
That's a clever
them
idea.
and do it. But please, since I've seen a lot of our leaders here, what I think we need to do, we need to, first of all, make sure the regional markets, they have to work. The regional markets, they have to work. Because you see, right now, we are not allowing free trade, but the other side that are working against us, the smugglers, they are having a free trade. Okay, because, you can move goods from Benin, for example, into Nigeria. But those guys, you see them loading rice, loading stuff, and, going through the forest borders that we have. So, the African continent is one of the continents that I think it is a hidden story. It is a story that I believe when you have faith, you invest, you will make quite a lot of money. It's true, there are risks here and there, but there are also a lot of areas of mitigating risk. Once you do your own calculation, then you move in, and definitely the story is good.
I'm going to ask you one last question now, because I said it earlier before, that all this work we're doing is not really for us, it's for our children and our children's children, the next generation of Africans. How do we create 10 more Dangotes? Well, what's your advice for those young African entrepreneurs?
I think the young African entrepreneurs, first of all, there's quite a lot of opportunity. They have to work very hard. It's not that easy. I mean, for example, I've been in business today. I don't look it, but I've been in business today for 45 years. So it's been a great journey. You have to be focused. You have to make sure that, you have a vision and you know exactly where to, go, and make sure we as Africans, we must make sure that we have good local domestic banks. Okay, because if you don't have local domestic banks, you are not going to be given that opportunity to be able to even scale the first hurdle. So you must be, we are all given opportunity. We know we are not born with money, yes, it's true. My, my grandfather, was rich, but he didn't, give me just free money to go and, trade. So you need strong financial institutions. And these guys, what they need to do is to now go calm down and make sure that, yes, they have the belief that, yes, things can happen. But it is not overnight. Majority of our youth, they are looking at making things happen the next day.
Patience is required.
Patience is required.
Yeah.
Tenacity is required. And also you have to be, you have to have a vision. You can't just jump into everything. You might not be good in everything.
Do you have to tell yourself, I will not fail, I believe this will succeed? You have to kind of...
You have to, yes, you have to believe in, yes, you have to, and I can tell you, especially with now, there are other modern ways of making money, technology.
You mean technology, fourth industrial revolution?
Technology, revolution, and so many other areas.
And our people are smart.
And our people are very, very smart. They are well educated. And I can tell you, within maybe a period of 10 years with AFCTA and Co., you can even have not only one, you can have maybe, we can create 50 Dangotes. It's not difficult.
But there's only one Dangote, and it's you. So I'm going to ask you to stand up, and I'm going to ask everybody, please, give a round of applause to the one and only Aliko Dangote.
Thank you.
Now. Okay, so back to the program at hand. I don't know what that gentleman is shouting, but I just heard the word Dangote, so we'll clap for that. Okay, where are we at? Sorry, just get as we change the furniture around, we're going on to another session now. This session looks at a really important issue. It's called Before I actually continue, I just see Spot in the corner there. I want you to just put your hands together for another legend, the Nobel laureate himself, Professor Wole Soyinka is with us. Now, the next session looks at a very important issue. It looks at, it's called Building Prosperity for Africans, the Challenges of Peace and Security. Your moderator is Omar Ben Yedder, and he is the publisher of IC Publications. You'll know many of the magazines that they produce: Africa Business Magazine, New Africa Magazine, and the Africa Banker Magazine and the Africa Banker Award. So please welcome Omar Ben Yedder of IC Publications, your moderator for this session.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here for the bank's 30th anniversary and for this very important session. So I'm delighted, actually, that the issue of peace and security has been upgraded to the opening of the 30th anniversary of the Afreximbank. I was speaking to the pioneer president a couple of weeks ago for an interview that we will be publishing soon. And he said, actually, so looking back 30 years ago, the situation in Africa was a lot more challenging because there were a lot more issues of peace and security. So there was a lot more instability across the region. Nonetheless, we're seeing new fault lines appear, and we know that the single biggest barrier to trade ultimately is peace and security. Without peace and security, you will not be able to trade. And I think this is a very important issue that the bank wanted to highlight, and that the bank wanted to increase urgency towards dealing with our own peace and security issues. So I'm delighted to be welcoming with me on stage His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn, former Prime Minister of Ethiopia. A round of applause, please. General William E. Ward, former U.S. Army General and the first Commander of United States Africa Command. General, thank you. I've also got General Chris Abutu Garuba, former military observer of the UN Angolan Verification Mission and former commander National War College, Federal Republic of Nigeria. And finally, we've got General Dr. Emmanuel Kotia, who is the CEO of the Ghana Boundary Commission and a senior lecturer at the Ghana Command and Staff College, as well as other institutions. Thank you. Thank you, General. Maybe we'll start with you, Excellency. So, as I said, the pioneer president, Mr. Christopher Adodu, said that the situation today in Africa is better than it was 30 years ago, saying that we're seeing new fault lines, we're seeing the emergence of transnational terrorist groups. So what's your reading of the current situation today? Is it better? Are we in control? Or are you worried?
Thank you very much. I would have loved Baba taking this seat with the generals here. But nonetheless, I think I would say the general landscape of security in Africa is worsening rather than improving, because we can cite some of the examples now. If you see terrorism and violent extremism, and as well as radicalization in Africa is growing. You know, we have never seen countries like Burkina Faso, Benin, and others could be impacted by terrorist actions, which is an increasing visibility of the terrorists everywhere. Even in the Horn of Africa region, where my country is situated, Al-Shabaab has not been declined so far.
it's still increasing its impact on the regional, security apparatus, and its actions are growing. So I think these are manifestations that show that security in Africa still needs more attention than ever by our leaders in the continent. Besides, recently we are witnessing unprecedented, happenings like unconstitutional change of government, which is happening in the Western Africa region. In only 2 years, there has been coup d'etat in 4 countries, which is contagious in West African countries. But we have seen also this in Horn of Africa, like Sudan, which is the case in point, a long-standing security issues that has not been addressed is troubling Sudan at this time, where you see that, the Sudanese issue is becoming very much worrisome. So all this coupled, you see that the security situation in Africa is worsening from time to time. But again, when you see exacerbating issues like climate change in western part of Africa and some in Horn of Africa, you see there is conflict between herders and farmers because of the climate change. And that insecurity is also growing from time to time, and we need to address also those issues outright. Beyond that, you can even see demographic issues are also playing a major role. Africa is a young continent, and the growth of young population is, exponentially happening. And if we do not address this issue of demography properly, then I think that is also creating some problems and riots and every other, issues in our continent. So I think, at nutshell, you can say that the security landscape in Africa is worsening, and there are surges of new events that are coming up, which has not been addressed properly. So to me, these all are manifestations. The manifestations of the root problem, which has not been addressed. To me, the main problem in Africa is governance deficit, which has not been addressed. I think a long-standing governance deficit, if it's not addressed, all these manifestations will continue and perpetuate from time to time. So basically, it is about, we're talking about prosperity, but the likelihood of becoming prosperous Africa, as it is set in Agenda 2063, where we want to see Africa we want, which is peaceful with itself and with the global community, and an Africa which is prosperous. But nonetheless, we have a long way to go to address that issue of Agenda 2063 at this moment. So I think this is where it is now as a landscape.
So you've raised many different issues, some that are within our control, some that are outside of our control. But one that is within our control is helping solve regional issues or local issues like Sudan. So recently we've seen a delegation go to Russia and Ukraine to try and mediate there, but we don't seem to see the same urgency or the same effort to deal with some of our own domestic issues, or regional issues such as in Sudan. So when it comes to Africans and our African institutions, are we seeing enough urgency, enough action to deal with our own problems? We can't outsource development, so we shouldn't be outsourcing our own peace and security.
I think Africa shouldn't always be seen as a junior partner in the global, setting. Africa has to play its role at the global stage as well. So our leaders going to Ukraine and Russia is a responsibility that, as responsible global citizens, Africans also should play their role. But nonetheless, we play this because we have an interest. We should focus on our interest, not on the interest of others. So we do have Agenda 23, as I said. We want to be a peaceful, and a prosperous Africa. So I think global community play a major role in this regard, and we have to play that role. Of course, it doesn't mean that we have to focus on the global issues, but in the first place, we have to resolve our own issues first. Because what matters is we have to put our house in order before we embark into other issues, which is very much a burning issue in our continent. So to me, we need to focus internally and solve our own problems internally. Africa is a rich continent. We don't need to beg money for somewhere for our own security. If you see the illicit financial flow, the amount of money that goes to other continents from Africa, I think that is much more bigger than the aid we get from our donors. But the problem of governance, as I said, is a long-standing which has not been addressed, and we should address our own problems within our union, which is a very important union we have, and also respective countries should address this issue. So nonetheless, but we have to play a role at a global setting, and we have to also be getting our own rightful place in the global architecture. So I think this shouldn't be also ignored.
Okay, and we'll get to what geopolitical changes right now are impacting the continent. But maybe I'll go to you, General Ward, if you don't mind. So His Excellency mentioned the issue of transnational terrorism, and but we also, pre this panel, discussed that there are issues of governance. A recent UNDP report said actually that most terrorists aren't driven by ideology; they're driven by poverty to terrorism. So it's something that we need to address, obviously. But the issue of terrorism is still real, and it needs to be dealt with. So, but the enemy is to some extent less visible than your traditional military enemy. So how do you go about tackling terrorism and eliminating these cells of terrorism while at the same time trying to create opportunities for the youth that His Excellency mentioned?
Well, that's a great point, and let me thank the African Export-Import Bank for inviting me to participate. You may wonder, why is this retired U.S. Army American general participating in a conference of this nature here? It's precisely because of what you've just heard. I, as the first commander of U.S. Africa Command, looked at this continent and all of its glory with its importance to itself as well as to the global environment. And in that regard, in a conversation that I had with Nelson Mandela before he passed away, he said one thing to me that struck me and has stayed with me, and that is an Africa, in his eyes, that was responsible for its own security, but with the help of its friends. And so when I came to the continent as the commander of AFRICOM, it was as a friend to do all I could to assist in providing whatever my African partners asked me to do as they sought to provide for their own security. Clearly, in doing so, it impacted the security of the United States, but also global stability. Because in Africa, that was able to provide for its own security would then be less susceptible to external influences that have come in and disrupted the society, has led to the terrorism that exists because of how societies that are disadvantaged are exploited by external factors who come to the continent to do things in their own selfish interests, but to the detriment, to the downfall of the peoples of Africa. Terrorism is in that bailiwick of activities. External actors who have come, taken advantage of situations of poverty, instability, weak governance, and other drivers of instability, lack of food food insecurity, droughts, and because of those conditions that exist, some that are natural, others that are made by human beings who exist in a place, but at the disadvantage of the citizens. And so as these problems perpetuate themselves, as they grow, as they become unattended to, then you have conditions that are created that are ripe for, that are breeding grounds for terrorist activities that destabilize not just the local environment where they operate, the country, the sub-region, but indeed further destabilize the global environment. And so as we look at what can be done to ameliorate, to reduce, to stamp down, to stop these problems, what do we see? As was pointed out, we see conditions that we can't control, but in some cases there are things that could be controlled. In my mind's eye, security and development are part of the same dynamic that's required to reduce things like violent crime, violence, terrorism, the preying on society by external actors, sometimes the preying on society by their own security forces because of these conditions that exist. And so, yes, indeed, there is a need to reduce the violence, because when you look at what's being spent to fight terrorism, to fight violence, be it internal or external, those resources are huge, huge drains on the monetary resources that are available to any country to help lift its people, to help cause the economic advancement, development that needs to occur so that societies and people in a society have an opportunity to have a better tomorrow than today, so that little girls, little boys can feel free to walk, to be educated, to have a decent level of health. But that doesn't exist in an unstable environment. So security, yes, but development, absolutely, because development, economic development, is the long-term guarantor of peace and stability. But you must have it in an environment that it can mature, that it can be nurtured, that it can grow. And that's why this notion of security is so critically important in a country, in a region, and indeed across the continent. But as been so demonstrated recently, the global scene, because what happens one place impacts another place. No longer are we a continent whereby we are in a little bubble, or a country that we're in a little bubble. Trade, demographics, population, the need to be your young population to have some place to go, to work, to make a decent living so that they have a more secure future. That is a part of the global commons as we see it today. And so for me, security, not security that's all expansive, but what's needed so that your borders are protected, so that the environment is conducive to investment, so that there would be things that would come in not to exploit, but to cause those in a particular country to be better served, so that you don't have a country needing to spend 25, 40, 50% of its resources on providing some security because of how it's being threatened by external actors.
So, General, because you're saying two things at the same time, ultimately. You're saying that we need to invest in development, but at the same time, we need to have strong forces in place to ensure security. I remember a British foreign minister once said, diplomacy without arms is like an orchestra without instruments. It's meaningless. So when you look at when you were on the continent and you looked at the military capabilities of the different countries, do you think we had to invest more in our military capabilities, or do you think we were investing too much on military and not enough on development? I mean, I'm not sure I understand where you think we should be putting our resources ultimately, and whether we need to strengthen our military capabilities and our partnerships as a continent to make sure that we can control our borders, that we can push back any foreign actors that may have, and everyone's got vested interest, but they may have vested interests that go against the continent. So what are you saying there?
It's not spending more, it's spending smartly. Security forces are important, but it's how those security forces are developed, formed, trained, so that they are not a drain on society. The sizes, the missions they perform, how trained they are, so that its soldiers. There was an illustration that I used during the NDIA lecture series several years ago. And when you look at your security forces, are your soldiers, your police forces, are the people seeing those forces as such that a 8-year-old girl, 10-year-old boy, instead of running away, will run towards them and wrap their arms around them because they know that that force is there to protect them? Doesn't take a lot of money to do that. So it's not about spending more. They both have to exist simultaneously. Adequate professional security forces, as well as the resources that are required to cause development to be able to occur in ways that are meaningful to the people in their country. They aren't mutually exclusive. They operate jointly, but it's smart investment. It's smart investment, the right investment to make that the case.
Thank you. So one very quick question, and then I'll come to you, Dr. Kotti, if you don't mind. So when you were operating on the continent, did you see the urgency from your peers on the continent in dealing with certain issues, for example, that arose at the time? I mean, if you look at Sudan today, would you say that we need to have more urgency at an African level to make sure that we nip these conflicts in the bud? Ultimately, Sudan should be the breadbasket of Africa. We're importing grain from Ukraine, but Sudan has got the capabilities. Saudi was buying land from Sudan all those years ago, but instability has meant that it's not the breadbasket that it should be.
Right. Obviously, the continent is not a monolith. I saw different things in different places. Some places it worked to the benefit of the people that were there. In other places, there was a lot of work that needed to be done to make it better. And so it was a mixed bag, and it was, as Nelson Mandela said, the country itself is responsible for that. And in some places, I may not have been asked for help, and obviously we stayed away. In other places, there were things that could be done to help the professionalization of the force. And I say professionalization, I don't mean to spend a lot more money. It doesn't require that, but it does require something so that those soldiers are not preying on their societies. You want them protecting their sovereignty, not preying on their society. And it's the job of the governments to ensure that, so that those soldiers are doing their job, so when a little 8-year-old girl sees a soldier or a 10-year-old boy, they see that woman or that man in uniform as their friend and not to be afraid of.
General Kotti, if I can come to you in terms of maybe responding to what the General has said and also your reading of the situation. I know that the President of Ghana a few months ago was worried about what was happening in the Sahel region and in Burkina Faso, and potentially the fear of contagion to Ghana. So what's your reading of the fault lines of the state of security, and also collaboration with your partners in the region to ensure the security in the Gulf of Guinea and in the Sahel?
Thank you very much. The issue of security is very important. That is where I want to start from. And General Ward emphasized on it. Without security, no country can develop. And when you don't develop, there's no way by which any country will provide for the living conditions of the people. So these three elements are interrelated: security, development, and the living conditions or the welfare of the people. Without security, let's forget it, we cannot be able to develop. So it's very important for us. But one problem that we need to understand is that In this context, apart from the security situation that we are facing, we always have to envisage the emerging security issues that will follow. Once, in most cases in the African continent, we're looking at what is happening to us without envisaging what is coming and what is affecting other countries. Now, with the issue of terrorism came up, we know that terrorism is spreading in the Sahel. We have terrorism in northeast Nigeria and what have you. There have been a number of countries when some of these terrorist activities started, felt that probably these countries are being affected, but they stood aloof and eventually they were affected. Now, it's very dangerous because terrorism is it's spreading very fast. And some of the key issues that General Ward mentioned is that what are some of the drivers? Some of the drivers have to do with poverty that he mentioned, marginalization, economic conditions, deprived border communities, where we have violent extremist groups who can go to a deprived border community, realize that those people don't have the resources, they are able to talk to them, they are able to recruit them and say that look at the people living in Accra, look at the people living in the cities. They have a lot of advantage. They have water, they have schools, then they easily recruit them in that dimension. So one place that we need to place attention is deprived communities in our life. So looking at security and also following up of General Ward, we need to look at it in two dimensions. We look at the kinetic interventions and non-kinetic, and they must go side by side. And the kinetic is what you ask General Ward, what is the situation so far as arms are concerned? And let me state that most countries which are affected by these terrorist organizations are starved of arms, of how to respond against these terrorist activities. Now, what is the issue of non-kinetic? Whilst the kinetic or the counter activities are going against these terrorist activities, what efforts are we making on the non-kinetic front or the human security aspect to be able to prevent and to discourage some of our communities being recruited so far as terrorism is concerned? Having said that, it's important for us to understand that one of the key challenges that we have in Africa in preventing some of these things is that we lack very concrete security architectures. Now, concrete security architectures, by what I mean is that most countries in Africa don't have national security strategy. Those who even have do not even implement it to the letter. We do not have peace councils like what we have established in Ghana. We do not have regional and local level security councils. I want to mention that in Ghana, we have been able to develop what we call the national security strategy. This is the first time in 2020 that Ghana has evolved this. Now, in this particular strategy, one of the most important sections of that strategy is how to safeguard the security, peace, and stability of the country. And that is what I think we should be looking at. If we envisage and look at that aspect, we have various mechanisms, both local mechanisms, national mechanisms, regional mechanisms that we can really step up to be able to prevent and safeguard the security that we have. But the key thing is that terrorism is real. We've seen the emerging security issue as terrorists facing most African countries in Africa. It is real that it is coming, it's manifesting. We need to be very careful. We need to guard ourselves against it. Otherwise, we would continue to have problems so far as development is concerned. And when we don't develop because of this insecurity situation, the living conditions of the people will continue to be stagnant. And for that matter, the prosperity of Africa will continue to be derailed.
Thank you. I'd like to go to General Garuba quickly. You were one of the first chief military observers of the UN in Angola at the time, so over 30 years ago. We've seen Angola post-conflict really grow very rapidly and develop and transform its country. And so ultimately at the time, so in the 80s and during the 80s, you had Cold War tensions ultimately, and we are seeing heightening geopolitical tensions today that may impact the continent. So do the heightening geopolitical tensions that we're seeing outside of Africa worry you today? The sort of the second Cold War, they're calling it. Tensions between, obviously, Russia, China, and the US and other powers.
Thank you, moderator. Yes, I was first commander of United Nations in Angola during the difficult years, and I recall that the UN was able to bring about restore peace and security back to Angola. But we are concerned today about prosperity for Africa and the challenges of peace and security. How do we bring about prosperity for Africa, and how do we restore peace and security without interfering with the prosperity for Africa? My view is that Africa, as it stands, has no business being called the poverty capital of the world. Africa has, is blessed with resources, lots of resources, abundant resources, ranging from gold, uranium, lithium, petroleum resources, oil and gas, and so forth, cocoa, and above all, we are blessed with rich land resources for agriculture. So we have no business to go hungry. We think that the main issues with us in Africa that brings about insecurity is poverty. Poverty, unemployment, lack of education, even if one is educated, lack of jobs, unemployment, and underemployment. And that's what brings about all this insecurity. We need to come up with a strategic action plan for prosperity for Africa at the various regions, to be coordinated by the peak at the African Union. Because we are blessed with resources, we are blessed with land, we should be able to carry out agriculture and feed our people. We must be able to feed our people. So we must invest heavily in agriculture so as to have food production. We have to create agricultural technologies. We have to promote tourism, and we must bother about the democracy of the stomach. Once your people are happy, when they have food to eat, they'll be happy. And they're happy, then they will not go about looking for things to take from those who can afford to eat, because they do not have anything to eat. So we must emphasize that. And that's why Africa must come up with a strategic plan of action to develop its own prosperity. Nobody's going to do it for us. Nobody's going to do it for us. The problems of insecurity, again, like it's happening in Sudan, or that happened in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and all that, in Angola, is as a result of third-party influences. We, on our own, we have been able to solve problems, and we can solve problems. But when we have interference from outside because of their interest, they want to plunder our resources, they will trigger insecurity so that we can fight ourselves, so that they can have the ability, the opportunity to take what they want to take. We have Africa as one of the, or the country of the future, the continent of the future, because of what we have on the ground in our country. Are we going to be able to be allowed to enjoy our prosperity? We are not going to be allowed. We should be prepared to fight to be able to secure our continent, for us to be able to enjoy what we have on the ground, in the land, underground, in Africa as a continent. So everything depends on us, on Africans. We have huge human capital. Like I said, we have human resources, natural resources. We should not just fold our arms and allow third-party influences to come and take it away from us. They will do all they can to come and take it. They did it in the past, they will come again. From the slave trade, which we are still suffering from the consequences, the next thing is to grab the resources under the ground. And they will do it. So we should be prepared to defend ourselves and to fight to preserve what we have. And I think we must, well, I'm not a philosopher, but I think that we need to make sure that our political leaders are properly able to give leadership that we need. We need good leadership. We need good governance. That is very, very, very important. Without good leadership, without good governance, without justice, rule of law, there can be no security. We in Africa, we have always embarked upon rule of man instead of rule of law. We must come back to rule of law and justice. That's the only way that we can secure our continent, secure our nation, and be prepared to survive. We have the means. We existed before the white man came. We can do it again. We have security intelligence. We have indigenous strategic intelligence, or what we may call security in Africa. We should make good use of it, not for negative tendencies, but for positive uses in the interest of our people, so that our youths, who are supposed to be and are expected to be the leaders of tomorrow, don't destroy the land because the leadership of the present generation has failed to prepare the ground for the future of the youths. The youths are the leaders of tomorrow. And right now, there's so much poverty on the land. There's so much injustice, social injustice. There's lack of social security. And we're not leaving anything behind. So we have to come up with a strategic plan to come up with African local prosperity, which we can achieve from what we have, the resources on the ground, in our land. We can build it up. You know, we can use our friends, but this time we must open our eyes, you know, and not like before, when they would come with a Bible and a gun and given to both sides, you know, of the country, and the leadership, those with the Bible and those with the gun, start fighting each other. That doesn't carry us. In the end, they are the one that take the glory.
Thank you, General. So coming back to world of great power rivalries, Your Excellency, I know you wanted to say a few things about them, but what worries you ultimately about the heightened geopolitical tensions that we're seeing today? Is it interference of external actors on the continent, or is it more economic pressure, protectionism, the Chinese or the Americans or the Russians putting pressure on African states to take sides? Is it, what's worrying you ultimately in terms of what we're seeing today externally impacting the continent?
Well, we are interested in...
Yeah, sorry, I wanted His Excellency to also comment on...
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you very much, General, trying to support me. The whole thing is, I think we should be true to ourselves. First of all, I see that the problem is not external force. The main problem is internal, and we have to address our internal problem within Africa before pinpointing to others, external forces. When I say this, I think we have no problem in identifying problems, identifying the causes. But our problem is we are not capable enough to deliver on what we have already said to ourselves. We have a very important and landmark blueprint, which we call Agenda 2063. Chairperson of the Commission, the then chairperson is here, and that has been drafted in an inclusive way, making our citizens taking part in the process of having that blueprint. But the problem is, since she left office, now it is, I think, 8 years, almost 8 years, and the implementation of that blueprint still remains to be very slow, and it has not been as it was expected. So as the generals were saying, there is a need to transform our governance and leadership, and there is a need for political commitment, not only commitment, as Baba was always saying, political action in our continent. That's the main reason. I know that daughter of Kwame Nkrumah is with us here, and our icon has said African solutions to African problems. But since then, are we true to ourselves that we are solving our problems without external interventions? So I think that's the main question. Our problem is a delivery problem. It's not about understanding what has to be done. So to me, unless otherwise we address the basic issue of the problem of our own people, like poverty, marginalization, or all those things which has been mentioned earlier, which I don't want to repeat because they are always there in the literature and everybody knows them. But the main issue is which countries and leaders are delivering on those promises to the people. I was always hoping when opposition, which is always exposing the ruling party's deficiencies, when they come to power, I expect that they deliver on those issues. But the same thing happens. And it's always vicious. So we should be true to ourselves. Be it opposition or ruling in Africa, I think the whole issue is we are not true to ourselves. I expect the new generation will come up and deliver on the promises to our people. I think, people has come to streets. Street action has been taking place throughout Africa, and there are government changes taking place in many countries in Africa. But because there is no leadership, those public actions, including the Arab Spring, has failed. And so what's needed now is, delivering on our promises, and a committed generation is needed in Africa to change the whole process and then transform our continent. So then, we have the blueprint, and we have to negotiate with our global partners on our existing blueprints to our interest. No one is coming for charity. Every country coming to Africa. We do have China, Africa, FOCAC. We do have TICAD. We do have Saudi Africa. We do have Turkey Africa. We do have, Gulf Africa. You can mention there is no major power globally this time who is not trying to partner with Africa. This is an opportunity for us Africans. We should come up with our own strategy how to deal with these different stakeholders coming to deal with us. And we know it's a win-win. Everyone wants benefit out of that partnership, and it's a give and take process, but we are not ready to go for that. We still go as 54 countries to negotiate with these that Africa conferences and bilateral dealings. So we need a strong African Union, which represents all the African countries, can negotiate with our partners properly. So I think that's where we are. It's an opportunity as far as I am concerned. But there are unwarranted interferences, like, for example, in Libya. We Africans, we said we will handle the Libyan case. So we sent our leaders as a team to Libya to negotiate and handle this issue. But the superpowers came and destroyed Libya, and then afterwards they left, and Libya remains a destroyed country until today. So there are unwarranted interferences that has to be stopped. I think we have to speak out this boldly. So I think, but the main issue is the ball is in our court. We have to prepare ourselves to negotiate properly. We have to be capable enough to show and express our interests, because it is always a win-win process. So I think this is very important. And from some corner, they might come and say, yeah, China is trying to exploit Africa. So some of the Western powers, they come and tell us that you have to get rid of China. But we say, look, there is one survey which has been made by the African Barometer in 34 African countries. So the interest of Africans is 63% of Africans want China's influence on Africa. And similarly, by the same token, 60% of Africans also want US to involve in African development and security. So that all shows, it's almost balanced figure, which shows that Africans, they don't care whether the cat is black or white, but we only need that the cat should catch the mice. That should be our philosophy.
And on that note, I'd like to call the panel to a close. I'm being told that our time is out. But thank you very much to His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn, General William Ward from the USA, General, it's a house full of generals today, General Garuba, former military observer of the UN Angolan Verification Mission, and General Dr. Emmanuel Kotia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you to